right. Hi, everyone. This is John Kilkenny, the director of the Sewanee Music Festival, and I'm here today with a good friend, wonderful musician, and entrepreneur, Jauvon Gilliam, who is the principal timpanist of the National Symphony and founder of Capital Percussion. Jauvon, how are you?
Hey, man, John, thanks for having me, man. I'm really doing really well, thanks.
Good. And I guess a better question, it's great to see you again. And I guess maybe a better question is, where are you at the moment? Because I know you're not here in DC.
No, my wife and I decided to be COVID safe and try to keep our child as active as possible. So we have got together with other people that have tested negative in a couple of different pods. And we did one in Indianapolis, which is where she's from. And now we're actually in California, which is where my best friend is. So we are sort of hanging out in a larger pod safely together. So we packed up the car, drove over, just hanging out, wearing masks. I have my mask somewhere, but it is not in the frame. So yes, here it is. Mask up,
We're,
mask first.
we're all in a good place to, we don't have to worry about that. But
Right.
great. Well, so and you drove out there. You just said that casually. So you've been road tripping
Yes.
this time.
We've
That's great.
been road tripping with Amazon Fire in the back and lots of snacks. So it's good.
Nice, nice. Well, that sounds like one way to pass this whatever this is, this pandemic, this weird time we're living in, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about. But um, you and I have we've known each other. We've been here in Washington for a while. I've enjoyed watching you play and the work that you've done with the orchestra and also at Maryland and with Capitol. So we're going to talk about all of that, Capital Percussion. We're going to talk about all that, but I want to give folks that are going to watch this a little bit of sense of kind of who you are and your journey to where you are. I think when, especially for our students that check in on this and folks that might be joining us for the January program or work with you in whatever ways they are going to do that. It's easy to look at somebody who's achieved what you've achieved and, founded this business and won this major job, won a couple of jobs, not just one job, but, had audition success in multiple venues and kind of go, well, there's not that it's easy, but it's kind of like, well, that person's special or they have this special thing. And I think you're special, Javon, but I also think there's a journey that everybody goes on that is often overlooked when students
Right.
see us at the end, at the end result, right? Is the big
Right.
job and a big this. So, tell us a little bit about your journey, kind of where you came from and your studies at, I know you went to Butler, but, your studies with John and kind of how that shaped you and, all of that to the degree that you want to put all that out in the universe.
Yeah, sure, man. I am from Indiana, born and raised, piano background. Went to Butler on a piano scholarship. Chose to switch to percussion when I met John Craybill, who was the director of percussion at Butler University. It's a small school, but the great thing about it is that like John is he's a people person, and so I learned how to be the person that I am because of him, thanks to just meeting him, chance meeting. So like I chose to do percussion there. He told me that there was a way you could sort of make money, air quotes, playing drums, and I blindly, naively just sort of said, yeah, sure, this seems great. So I just followed him blindly and did what he said. He got me in touch with a couple of people that were super influential in the orchestra world, Tim Adams and Paul Yancic. And so from there, I got sort of connected, kind of sort of into like, that particular sort of lane, Cleveland being where Tim went to school and obviously that's where Paul still is. And so that's kind of sort of how that happened. And for me, it worked out that I kind of stuck with sort of that one particular style of playing. I know that for a lot of people, it works when they sort of kind of study with a whole bunch of other people and kind of create their own sound. But for me, because I had no direction, growing up drums wise, it was good for me to have one solid sort of focus. So I did that. Graduated from Butler, went to Cleveland, started my master's in Cleveland, and then I got really lucky and won a job when I was still pursuing my master's in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's a great gig, great people, great orchestra. I have some of my best life memories are up there. Spent 7 years there, and then got lucky again and won the job in DC. And I've been here ever since, in 10 years that I've been here, hanging out with the likes of people like you. And it's a dream job. I'm really happy. And yeah, so that's been sort of the musical journey from up to now. And when I got the job at the NSO, the university, I saw some of my work at the University of Manitoba, and that's when I come teach there. And of course, I happily accepted. So that was my life for the first 8 years being in DC until I started the business, which kind of made it a little bit more complicated. But
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about
Yeah.
the other project, which is, you know, we all have our other projects, but
Project.
it's a huge endeavor
Right.
project, right? The other
Right.
thing, right? But I want to stay on the orchestra just for a bit, and you're playing and then you're teaching. So in terms of your work with the symphony, obviously you're the principal timpanist and you have, you know, a leading role in the orchestra and in this section. But talk a little bit about your approach to and tell us a little bit about your approach to playing in the orchestra and how you know see your role as the principal player, as the timpanist, and kind of how that works in your mind and within your orchestra.
Yeah, so being a Timpanist is obviously like it's a great job for me. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also an only child, so I love being around people, but I like my own space. So like the fact that I can be in this group and create, you know, be a part of this bigger thing, but I've got my fort, you know, that keeps people away from me with my set of drums, it's like perfect for me, right? And so like in that way, it's the perfect gig, but also with regards to like how what the role of the timpanist is in my orchestra. For what it's worth, like my orchestra trusts me for the most part. Like every musician has their tendencies. Like I'll be completely honest and vulnerable with you right now. Like my tendency is to I'd much rather be early than to be late if it has to do with playing. I'm gonna stick it, I'm gonna lay it out there, and if I'm wrong, I'll fix it, I'll adjust. But like for me, I'd much rather put it out there and then just kind of say, let's go, people, you know? Not necessarily like with tempo, but like just with placement. And for whatever reason, my orchestra appreciates that. Most of the musicians are kind of cool with that and they kind of go along with it. And so as long as I'm in sync with the conductor and the conductor's in sync with me, like, you know, when things are kind of going and moving, I feel very comfortable sort of playing where I feel comfortable. And most of the other principal musicians, we have such a good relationship that we kind of listen to each other, you know? And so that's kind of sort of how it seems to work in my band. I take the approach that like I'm usually wrong, so if there's an intonation issue or if there's a placement issue, I usually look at myself first and I'm like, okay, what can I do different? And then if it still doesn't work, then maybe I'll go and talk to someone and try to figure it out. But like being the leader from the back, which is kind of sort of how I see Timpani, is something that I take pride in. I like the fact that, you know, like for me, anybody can derail a performance or, you know, a particular situation for sure. Like, you know, if the strings come in early or if, you know, the trumpet's really out of tune or too loud or whatever, anybody can derail the performance. But I feel like a timpanist really has a special, they can really train wreck something, you know? And
Yeah,
I
we could
think,
really screw it up if we want
right,
to.
right.
Yeah, sure.
And you know, I try to make sure that I, you know, I've come very prepared and make sure I try not to do that. You know, I've definitely had my moments where I've done some things on stage that, you know, I'd rather forget, or, you know, we can sort of, you know, talk about so that they are, you know, in the annals of time forever. But I think that like for me being that sort of leader from behind is and leader from the back of the band is what makes being a timpanist sort of special for me and for my job. And I've had the very good fortune of playing with other orchestras that you know have different playing styles, have different you know feels, and they're all good. But for me, I really like when I'm home, you know, with my band because I feel very comfortable playing with them, and we make some great music together. So
Absolutely. So in both in your career and now in the orchestra, you have a lot of experience on both sides of the curtain, right? I mean, you took a number of auditions, were successful in several, and now you are on the other side, both hearing percussion auditions and assistant audition that you just finished with Scott Christian, and then there's also you know your role in hearing other instrumental auditions. So it's kind of a two-part question, I guess. What do you attribute your success in your audition career, and what do you try to transfer to your students when you're you know, coaching them because I know a big part of what you do is helping prepare folks for auditions. And then what are you hearing on the other side of the curtain that you think are perhaps things that students don't always realize that committees are listening for?
yeah,
So
yeah. I think with regards to me and how I you know prepare for auditions, for me it was like just sort of like tunnel vision, isolation. Like I mentioned before, the way that I sort of came into this sort of percussion lane was a bit naive and sort of like not knowing anything, like you know really you know babe. You know, I didn't have any sort of preconceived notions. Nobody told me how hard or how competitive it was going to be. So for me, it was just like, it's drums. This is all good. Let's have a good time. So I think that helped me because um, I didn't know, man. I didn't know. Like, you know, I mean, you Philly guy, man. You guys like the top of the top. You guys have this huge pedigree, like how hard it is. You knew what it takes. I had none of that, man. I was just a dude just trying to have a good time, play some drums, like that, and that really helped me.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but there's definitely an advantage to that, right? I mean, like, it's great if you're, I mean, it's the grass is always greener, right? Like, I think it's great when if you're able to encounter somebody at a young age who can build you up and, give
Mm-hmm.
you all these experiences, but that can sometimes give students a false sense either of their own ability or conversely, a false sense of, I don't want to say how hard this is because it's hard to win a job, but like,
Mm-hmm.
we see a lot of people who put so much pressure on themselves to win or to clear a round or to they've done all this that they buckle under that pressure. So
The
having
pressure's the
that
part
sense.
that Yeah, the pressure's the part that is hard to sort of, once you know how hard it is, like it's like that when the glass ceiling shatters, like the glass shatters, like when you see your mom and you've known her for for however long your whole life, and then you finally realize that she smacks when she eats, or like when you realize that your wife never she never puts the toilet paper on the right way, like these things that didn't really
Right,
matter
right.
until you figure them out, and then it just is the worst thing ever, right? And I think nerves and pressure with auditions are like that. I didn't have that. I didn't know. And so that
Right.
definitely helped. But the fact that I know now and that I'm teaching students that know, it's been an interesting sort of dynamic on how to get them to sort of diminish their nerves, And I think that for me, we try to practice it, we try to prepare for it, we definitely talk about it, because every person's different, right? I've had students that have won jobs that have sort of like no emotion, no nerves, sort of like nerves of steel. And then I've had the ones that like have to shower after their every round because they're so sweaty.
Right.
Like I've
Right.
seen the whole gamut, and so it's individualized to each student. But the one common denominator that I have seen is a few common denominators. You have to have the work ethic. You have to sort of put what I call the man hours. You have to put the time in behind the instrument so that you feel comfortable. Because no matter how good your nerves are, how strong you have you're nervous. It doesn't matter if you can't play. It doesn't matter if you don't know how
Right.
to play a tune. It doesn't matter if you don't have the technique. So first you have to be prepared. And then after that, it becomes sort of like you cater your ideas to each student or to each person getting prepared for it. I know for, like I said, one of my students that got really nervous for auditions, we would make sure that every lesson I would kind of create a chaos. I'd come in early. I'd text them 5 minutes before, change up the location,
Hmm.
get to the lesson. I'd start yelling at him for no reason in the between the extra. Like I'd make it really uncomfortable for
Right.
him in some silly ways. Like nobody's gonna yell at you in an audition, of course, right? Especially somebody that cares about you, that's trying to prepare for you. But it's making sure that he was kind of sort of be aware and try to focus and push through. And it was for him, it was pushing through um, the distractions. Like I said, somebody screaming at him, the drum kind of being out of tune, me coming over and changing the pitch as he's playing, so he's the fixing and adjusting, completely things
Right.
that would never happen. But it's the practice of dealing with these things in a row. I'm not sure that's what helped him win a job, but I'm sure it's one of the things that actually propelled him to actually win a job. So,
Well,
you
Chris
know,
Devaney would talk about this a lot in classes that he does where you have to prepare, and he's not the only one. I mean, you're saying a similar thing in a bit of a different way in terms of preparing a student, but just when you think you've thought of all of the variables in an audition, um, it's going to change, and if you're not prepared for that, that change can just completely freak you out. And I recall an
really
audition
derail you.
experience. Yeah, I mean, I recall an experience I had where an orchestra said you're gonna have this amount of time in the warm up room, and you're gonna have these instruments, and I had none of those instruments and less time in the warm up room, and we have all lived this, right? And I had thought about that and kind of had a plan for that, um, so I was prepared. But the only reason I had thought about that is somebody gave me a heads up, like somebody prepared
Right,
me to have that understanding. And I think
right.
what you're talking about is important. That yeah, no one's probably going to run up on stage and change the pitch while they're playing, but
Mm-hmm.
the pedal could slip, or if they're playing on cat, I mean, any myriad of things could happen similar to that. Somebody on the committee could say hello to you because they know you, and that throws you off your game. I've seen that happen too, where the screen is down and you walk out on stage and someone says, "Oh, hey," and it's like, "Oh, wait,"
You're
that
actually
can,
speaking to me, and that happens, it throws you off. Yeah. And those are the
yeah,
things you kind of have to figure out on the fly, talking about like things that you can't has nothing to do with the notes, has nothing to do with the width of the bars or the,
Right.
it has nothing to do with these variables that we work so hard on. It's the other stuff. And because at the end of the day, you kind of have to put it all together at one time, right? You have to play well. You have to not get sort of nervous. This person can't speak to you when they have like all these sort of, these factors have to sort of converge on that day, and I say it all the time, like winning a job isn't luck, but where you do, there's definitely some luck involved, right? So you have to put the work in. But like, I was not the best player August 9, 2009 when I won this job. I just happened to be the best player that day, right?
Right.
There were some really great players that probably could wipe the floor with me tomorrow or yesterday or the day after, but it just happened to so happen that people, it just converged that day. And I had a really good day that day, and people's ears kind of like what I did. So it's very, subjective. It's not perfect. There's no perfect audition situation. We all know that, but we do the best we can.
Well, and I think it's really just to go back to something you said earlier, real quick, because there's a, especially now with Zoom and streaming and all of the world we're living in, but even before that, there's a lot of information going out to students about shortcuts and quick tips and hacks and ways to kind of deal with all this stuff, and that's great to share information, but there's no shortcut to putting the time in behind the instruments, right? And to log in the hours and lonely hours, right? In a practice room, in this, studying the scores, doing that work. And I think it's tempting. I'll be very careful how I say this. It's tempting to seek out a way to short circuit some of that, right? And there is, using your practice time efficiently. That's not what I'm certainly not what I'm talking about. I know it's not what you're talking about. I mean, everyone's smart and efficient in the room, but boy, you got to put the hours in, right? I mean, you put the hours in, you tell your students that, and anyone that comes to play for you. And so I think it's just for the students that I know will watch this, just to underline that, get all the information you want, play for people, study with one person, study with three people. Those are all subjective things, but if you're only willing to put a couple hours a day in behind the instruments,
Right.
it's not going to happen, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just
You're
not
gonna
going to
get
happen.
in as much as you put out, and I mean,
Yep.
like you have to have the drive and desire. And there are people that are great. They're these super super freaky talented people, but they might not be they might not have the right temperament. They're really talented people, but they don't necessarily. You get the job, and then people don't like you. Like I say, can't be a jackwagon, right? You got to have the whole package. You got to be a good person, and you have to be able to play well. Like I've said it 100 times over. I'd much rather hire the a good player that's a great person than the absolute best player that's a jackwagon. Because I got to work with you every day. I got to see you every day. I got to talk
Right.
to you every day. Like if you're gonna come in, if I have an issue or we're not playing something together or there's something going on stage, and I come up to you and you immediately make it an issue, like after 2 or 3 times, man, I'm not gonna come back to you. And that's gonna hurt the artistic product, right? And then it sort of spirals and the negativity, like it can kind of get out of control. And so I've seen that happen. Luckily, not in my band, with
Right.
the people that I work with, my close, with Eric and Scott, we have a great sort of camaraderie. But I've seen it happen with others, and it's just not good.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it happens. Yeah, yeah, I understand. So I want to shift now and talk about your work as an entrepreneur and as a businessman, because it's something that I think is, well, I mean, I think it's great. So let me just say, I think it's great. I think it's really interesting, but it's also you're sort of following in a long line of orchestral musicians who start businesses, right? And
Mm-hmm.
some start them for reasons of making sticks or mallets, and others do for different reasons. But before we talk specifically about capital percussion, just was this something that was always on your mind, or is this something that kind of you decided you wanted to do after the job? What, like, how did this fit into your plan to have this
Right.
giant business on the side of an incredibly stressful job and a family and teaching and all this other stuff? Yeah.
Right. So you know me pretty well, dude. And like I
Hmm.
just said, man, I pretty naive brother, man. I just kind of do stuff like I had I had to give a speech in alma mater a few years ago, and I titled it "Ready, Fire, Aim," and that's the perfect way that you sort of encapsulate Jauvon, right? I kind of say this is a good idea, and I kind of do it, and then figure it out later, like, oh man, that didn't really work, or what did I've got myself into. And so that's kind of sort of how CP started a little bit. CP, I started it with Eric Shin, who's the principal percussionist at the NSO. We started it together on a whim at a Busboys and Poets over drinks. Like it literally happened that fast. We were like, we own enough gear that we're not using, that we probably could rent out to some of our friends, people like you and like some of the military guys if they ever needed it. Like this is just sort of in our train of thought, because the rental instruments that we would see come into the Kennedy Center, not really sure where they came from. They kind of sometimes left some to be desired with some of the quality. So it's like, let's see what we can do. Had no idea what I was getting into. Come to find out that, military bands, universities like Mason, you guys have better instruments than we thought. You don't really need that much rental stuff. And so like, it didn't work out the way that we thought. And fast forward a little bit, Eric decided to go a different direction and open up a restaurant. So I kind of had CP to myself. It's a whole other conversation,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And I kind of did some research, and I realized that there was actually a market in backline more than there was in percussion rentals. For those of you that don't know, backline is any of the concert equipment that are for more popular artists, for popular songs, from Earth, Wind and Fire, maybe the Staples, the Police, like Bruno Mars, like all these people when they come through to perform at any venue, whether that's a Kennedy Center or a Lincoln Center or whatever, they usually don't bring their own drums, keyboards, guitar amps. They usually don't bring any of their accessories. So there's usually a company in every major city, at least one company that provides these things for these artists as they do their tours. So once I realized that there was a sort of an avenue, I kind of said, oh, I think that I could do this. Jauvon Gilliam, National Symphony Orchestra, name recognition. It'll be easy for me to kind of jump in here and, whatever. That was not the case. It was not the case at all. Like it was there, there's a company in town that's been around for a while that has a pretty strong, hold on, the network here. So it's taken some time for me to sort of, understand all of this. But, pre-COVID, I think we were definitely doing, we had our best year pre-COVID, and our best quarter was Q1 of 2020 before
Wow.
everything, sort of hit. So like we were kind of finding our stride, but it's interesting because it's still music related.
Yep.
So I get to still talk about music. I still get to sort of provide a service that helps people to, put on a product. The whole reason that I love being a timpanist, the whole reason I love being an orchestra member is that we provide 2.5 hours of solace for these lawmakers, decision makers, Supreme Court judges. Like we are able to get them a time where they have to turn off their phone, shut it down, and sort of reset so that they can go out and try to make the world a better place. Right. And I like that. I do. And so that's kind of sort of where, I take my energy from that. And it's the same thing with CP. I'm able to provide equipment for the people that provide the solace for these
Right.
people to come out. So it's good. And so it's definitely grown in the last 2 or 3 years. It's grown a lot. I think it's grown over 400% the last 3 years. First couple of years were pretty slow, but it kind of exploded after that. And we're just trying to continue to build and grow and push through COVID.
Yeah.
And it'll be fun.
Well, it definitely is it's funny you talk about, kind of, hey, let's try this. And, there's a whole bunch of build the bicycle while you're riding it, or ready, fire, aim, and all of that sort of stuff. But a lot of the best ideas I've ever had, and the best ideas a lot of people have ever had, have been decided over drinks at a restaurant or at a bar. And, hey, let's try this and let's do it. I had thought for years, personally, just as an aside, and I've shared this with you before, like, I had felt there was a market for this for a while in Washington. Any city as large as DC and the DC region, I mean, not just Washington, but all of the performing arts in the whole area, to really just have one resource for equipment, seemed like not a good idea. So,
Mhm.
it would definitely a blue ocean there to swim in, and also to have, quality equipment, and to be able to get that from somebody that kind of knows what they're doing. Well, not kind of, who does know what they're doing, is a
Well,
really helpful thing.
I had to learn a lot about, I didn't know a lot of things that I feel like I should have beforehand. I didn't know about quarter-inch cables, inputs, outputs.
Well, I
Like
don't either.
I didn't know what a pickup was until
Right.
until this gig. I thought a pickup was just a truck. Like there's so many things that I didn't, know about, but you learn, you live and learn. Yeah.
And I think I think that's an important point too, for 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 folks that are watching this, that the process of learning and the process of experimenting really doesn't ever stop. And whether it's when you win your job, or if you're a university position, or you know freelance, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Whenever you think you are at a place where you're
Right.
done with something, there's a whole other lane to go into. That's still
Yep.
part of being a musician. And not only does the business, pre-COVID provide you with, some degree of additional, financial security or opportunities or whatever, but it's a whole other creative outlet for you, right?
Hmm.
In the
That's
business
right.
and being able to pursue that. And so I think it's important that, we to mention that idea of, being a creative person isn't just in the lane of playing an instrument
Performing.
or teaching
Right.
something. I mean, there's,
Right.
to start a business from scratch is a pretty creative thing to do.
Stupid creative is the word I use. Oh my goodness. Definitely had my learning curve. Took my lumps. Still take
Well,
them sometimes.
yeah, we all do. And I mean, I remember calling you when I had the opportunity to start with Sewanee. You were one of the people I reached out to, and I said, so, you have a pretty full life already, and you added this other thing, and how do you do it? And we had a really great. Distinctly remember that discussion as being really helpful for me to kind of shape a decision that I was leaning towards. But to hear somebody was doing all that you're doing, and then added this other thing, I was like, okay, I could suck it up and do something else that I want to do anyway. So anyway, man, listen, I know you've got a lot to do and you're with your family and you're going to be doing some teaching here coming up. So I wouldn't, it would be irresponsible of me in this discussion to end before I kind of give us a moment to talk about the world we're currently living in. And this video will probably um, be released on our social media channels at some point before the election. I suspect we both feel the same way about it, so we don't necessarily have to talk specifically about the election. But this is clearly a time to be alive, and I'm just kind of wondering how you're processing all this, and how you're reacting to the world that we're in now, and what you're seeing in classical music. And I'm just sort of asking you a very open-ended question to give you a chance to drive down any number of lanes you want to about
Right.
this world that we're in. So over to
I
you.
mean, yeah, sure. No, I mean, I've obviously given a lot of thought. Adding another thing to my plate, like I started a production company with two other guys, two other DC guys, to try to combat the sort of the systemic racism and the injustice that's been going on. Like, I won't go into the full story, but for me, I wanted to find a way to contribute that was impactful as I could be. Mr. Musician. My lane is music, right? I'm not a politician. I'm not not a public speaker. So like, it was like, what can I do that will be as as impactful as it can be with with resources that I have. And so after talking to a few people and getting in touch with some people, we decided to start this company where we create content that will actually get people to um, continue to talk, continue to think, continue to listen, continue to try to be open to understanding things that you didn't know before. And I think that's sort of what I think is what's going to help us move forward with regards to what's coming up in the next couple of weeks with the election. Is like things aren't always what you've known your whole life. I think I saw a quote somewhere that like people that think that America is the best country in the world have never been anywhere else or haven't been outside of their state or something like that. Like there's a bigger world out there than just what I know, than just what John Kilkenny knows, than what XYZ person knows. And I think the best way to sort of understand all that is to listen, is to be open to things that you might not understand. And then sort of absorbing all that and seeing where it takes you. As you know, I'm in an interracial marriage. My child is biracial. And the first part of COVID, we spent a lot of time with my in-laws. So I spent a lot of time with four uh, white people asking me, the only black person, how do we make change? And that's a really big question for someone
Right.
that's trying to find their own way themselves. And so, like, I had a lot of conversations with people that I trust, people that I love, about what they can do as non-black people to make a difference. And one of the things that came up was obviously listening to people as their stories. If you want to empathize with someone, you can't really just say, "Oh, I'm sorry," or how you have to actually try to put yourselves in their shoes, which is hard for a non-black person to do. But at the same time, what I think one of the things that kept coming up is, instead of worrying about not being racist, or so, people take pride in saying, hey, I'm not a racist. This is not wrong, or this is wrong. This is not right. We need to make a change. It's to shift your perspective from being not a racist to being an anti-racist, which is more actively opposed to the things that are happening, right? And what's been really evident to me is that we as Black people can't do this ourselves, right?
Sure.
We
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
help.
Of course. Yeah.
We need help from the mainstream, if you will. We need help from other people that don't look like me, that sound like me, that don't talk like me, that have the same experiences as me, in order to make a change. I kind of pivoted towards like the police brutality and the social injustice, but I think it's the same thing even with regards to what's going on with the election and everything else. Is that people just need to realize that the way that they see things isn't always the only way, and it's probably not the best way. You know, you might think it is for you, but it's probably not. And the minute we start to sort of think that, it's hard, it's confusing, it's challenging for you as an individual to sort of look at your entire sort of life's work, if you will, and say, is this really the best thing for humanity? Because it's selfless to do that, and that's
Right.
a really hard thing to do for a lot of people. A lot of people are self first. It's just the way that we're nature, we're wired, and so um, I don't know, man. That's a big question, but I think for
Yeah.
me, like I have definitely tried to find ways that Jauvon can be a better ally or a better advocate, sorry, for what's going on. And then because, like I said, of the people that are around me every day, I have tried to encourage them to be better allies to
Right.
help us. And so one day at a time, man. One day at a time. We voted last week. We're actually going to do some voter protection on the day of the election in Arizona. We're going to go to Arizona because it is the closest swing state.
Yeah. Sure.
And we're going to go and sit out at the polls on November 3rd and make sure people know where they're going, because there are people out there that are trying to make sure you don't know where you're going. So, like, we're trying to do what we can, try to make a difference and a change here. And, like, at the end of the day, man, I just want to see people happy and healthy. And like, I want to get back to sort of, the times where, where music was really, I could focus on as opposed to focusing on some of this other stuff.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that and going into that level of detail and candor, because the one thing that I have, I mean, I'm certainly not in the position to talk about any of this. I'm in the position to listen and do what I can to change and influence change and affect what I do and how I what I teach and how I program and the music that I select. I mean, just in my own little corner. I mean, I've done a ton of voter
Every
outreach and
little
get out the vote
yes,
things and all of
yeah,
that. I mean,
yeah.
there's stuff I've done in that part of my life too that
Mm-hmm.
has been really active. But I think it's also important, and I'm saying this maybe just for myself to when I go back and watch this, or to anyone else that is looks more like me, that constantly asking your Black friends to tell you how they feel and what they think is exhausting. Uh, and even with the best of intentions, can be,
It
I,
is, man. But if it helps,
yeah,
I'm good. Like if
right.
it
No, no, no. And I
helps
know,
for you,
yeah,
I will tell you again. I will explain it again for what you
right,
need. Like as long as like we're sort of in this on the same boat, on the same page. Now, if you're coming to me to combat and to fight and to like
right,
question, then dude, I don't have time, man. I will see you
right,
deuces. I don't have time for that. But if you really want to learn,
right.
then it is exhausting. But again, I appreciate people actually trying to understand, because it's in that understanding, it's in that listening that we're going to be able to move forward. And that's the only way we're going to do it, because we need your help. Like, whereas before it was
Absolutely.
just like, this is bad, this is crazy, whatever. All right, I'm on my way to Mason to go teach because I have my life and it's good, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Now it's like, okay, this is bad, this is bad. I'm on my way to go to Mason to go teach. But on the way, maybe I'll listen to this book, or maybe I'll just check out this podcast, or maybe I'll talk to my students about XYZ. I know I had a lesson a couple of weeks ago where all we talked about was Black Lives Matter. And I wanted to know how they felt about the situation, whatever. And I have some students that are in slightly different lanes, and that's cool.
Sure.
I'm
Right.
just trying to understand like where they're coming from and what I can do as a university professor to make sure that they feel comfortable. Like you can sort of make it so that it's, you know, make it so that they're in a good place, so that we can all try to grow and learn together.
Yeah. No, it's been the discussions that have been happening, and we've had them in my studio. We've had them amongst our faculty.
Mm-hmm.
Have been enlightening and helpful. So I appreciate you in this discussion we're having about business and music and all of that. Just taking a moment to go there into that area, because we just can't. I mean, it would be impossible for us to have
You can't ignore it. Yeah.
any kind of real discussion together without
Yeah.
bringing it up. So I appreciate your
Yeah.
candor and everything you're doing. So to find out all that you're doing, real quick, let us know. I mean, you're pretty accessible online. You're on social media. You've got Capital Percussion site. I mean, University of Maryland. I mean, is there any special place you want to guide folks towards, or just look you up and if you have questions about playing or teaching or business or anything else, just to reach out?
I'm easy, man. If people want to
Yeah,
find me, they know where to find me. Facebook, you can say University of Maryland. Instagram, like, it's pretty easy. But like as far as like the music related questions, like everybody knows somebody that knows me. So for the
right.
music people, like reach out. If you want to talk about some of this other stuff, some of this, how can we make the world a better place stuff, just vote, please vote,
Just
and
please vote. Yes.
just vote, and we'll figure it out. If everybody votes, we'll figure it out. So,
That's
yeah,
that's great advice. If everyone votes, we'll figure it out.
if
So
everybody
everyone go
votes,
vote.
that's it. So,
Everyone
yeah.
vote. And if you voted, make sure someone can get to the polls. Drive somebody to the polls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be a poll watcher if you can. Anyway, this has been great, Jauvon. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop this in a second, but stick around. I just have a quick thing to ask you offline. And if those of you that are watching are interested in working with Jauvon through Sewanee, we're very lucky that he'll be joining us in January for our winter festival. And I hope one day when after the business is back to normal and families can join us, that you could join us on the mountain in Sewanee. It'd be great to have you there. It's a
Absolutely,
beautiful
I'd
place.
love to,
So
man. I'd love to.
we're excited to have you with us in January, and look forward to the future. And I look forward to seeing you again when we're actually able to be in the same place. So
Absolutely, my
appreciate the
friend.
time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.